Silent Witness is the first Ruby Herring Mysteries film. This was released in 2020. It's directed by Paul Ziller, and it stars Taylor Cole as Ruby Herring and Stephen Huszar as Jake Killian. And I have to say it's pretty decent. I have some thoughts on the characters and the way they behave because they're not perfect, but I'm pretty pleased because I've just finished watching the 18th Aurora Teagarden film and I was looking for a new Hallmark mystery series to start watching. This one's actually very short. I think there are only 3 of the films, which doesn't sound too good for the quality, but actually this first one I rather enjoyed. And it also makes a lot of sense because Ruby Herring is a news reporter. She's actually a consumer news reporter. She's not in crime. But for the first time, we have a Hallmark protagonist in a mystery film where their role actually means they have a reason to investigate the crime. And yes, she shouldn't be completely in the crime scenes, but she does actually have an investigative role to play, and that works really well. And she seems to have a very good investigative personality, and she knows the right questions to ask and will help the detective, Jake, get to the bottom of the crime. But who was responsible for the death of Sugar? Sugar is a baker, a cake maker. She's been hired to do the cake for Ruby's sister's wedding. They're actually at this hotel for the wedding. It's set a couple of days beforehand. I think initially it's 3 days beforehand, so it's in the run-up to the wedding. And Sugar is found drowned in the water, in the river, and for about a second we entertained the idea that it could have been an accident. Very quickly there were signs that it pointed to murder. And Ruby obviously decided that she would start to investigate this. And for the most part, I found her involvement to be quite good. I think she, based on her position, the people she knew, she was in a good position to ask the right questions and maybe get information that the detective wouldn't be able to get, because obviously people don't always open up to a detective, but they might just open up to their friend's friend Ruby or their colleague's friend Ruby, depending on what relationship they had with her. So that worked really well. Now, with regards to the mystery aspect, it was definitely unpredictable, and we have quite a few suspects. There were multiple suspects, which I like. I don't like it when there's only 1, maybe 2 suspects, because it just usually means it's far too obvious. That being said, I will say I half worked it out. Of the multiple suspects, there were 2. 2 that I thought it could have been. One had a very strong motive, and that's why I thought it was them. And the other one just seemed suspicious, and the way they filmed this particular character seemed a little peculiar, so I thought maybe it could have been that person. And it ended up being one of those people, and I was kind of right. But even towards the end, I was not 100% confident with my decisions, so it's not completely predictable, and I really enjoyed that. I will actually, with a spoiler warning in a moment, tell you why I suspected one of the characters, because one of the characters I suspected because of another film I'd watched from Hallmark. But I'll get to that in a little bit. The pacing of the film is really great. The murder happens pretty quickly. I don't like it when we have mysteries where it takes about 35 minutes to get to the point. I like it when it happens early on because that means we have more time to flesh the mystery out, bring in more suspects. That's definitely done well here. Ruby is generally very likeable, as I said. She seems to be a good protagonist for this kind of film. She did do one thing that really annoyed me, and the detective did something that really annoyed me as well, but they're both spoilers, so I'll mention those in a minute. But in general, I liked the characters. They didn't irritate me at any point in any real way, and I'm looking forward to the next step. Very keen to see where the next film takes us, but for now, I'm happy with Silent Witness. I think it's a strong start to the Ruby Herring mysteries. And as I said, I think there are only 3 of them. But I am keen to see where we go from here. Silent Witness is an interesting story and generally one that I really enjoyed. So, spoilers from now. I'm going to discuss... I still won't tell you... Well, actually, I probably will tell you who was responsible, because when I explain it, it will give it away. So actually, I will explain the ending. And the other 2 things are not spoilers, but they're things that happened throughout the investigation. So So that might spoil things a little bit too. So I'll get in with those first. And the first one is when Ruby picked up the glass with the lipstick smudge on it. And that really bothered me because she just picked it up with her hand. She could have, the glass was on quite a low down table and it was quite near the edge. She could have cuffed her sleeve. Was she wearing sleeves? I don't know if she was wearing sleeves, but she's wearing clothing. She could have used her clothing to protect her hand. Or she could have shuffled the glass into her bag without touching it and without getting her prints on it. Yes, there was a lipstick smudge on it, and I'm assuming she was thinking they could get DNA from that, but she's also potentially putting her prints all over it, and obviously she's damaging potentially useful information, useful DNA, and there were just so many other ways she could have put that glass in her bag without grabbing it with her bare hand, so that bothered me. The other thing that really irked me is when Ruby phoned up Jake and she gave him some genuinely interesting information about another potential suspect and why she thought they'd arrested the wrong person. And Jake said, no, it's done. We've got the right person. I don't want to entertain it. He didn't say it in those exact words, but that was definitely the implication. That's not a good detective. You can't say, oh, well, we think we've got the right person, so I won't bother looking into anything else. And slightly concerned that if the water bottle that Ruby had found wasn't Sugar's water bottle, then and there wasn't the DNA match on it, then maybe the wrong person still would have been arrested and Jake wouldn't have looked into things, and that would have been really awkward. So he's actually a bad detective in that regard, and that's kind of frustrating. Hopefully that's just the one and only time he comes across as being a bad detective. Other than that, I had no problems with the character. Now, with regards to why I suspected the person who was ultimately responsible, I'm going to be very vague here because I can't fully remember this. If anybody knows what film I'm talking about, please let me know. But there was a film, I think it was a Hallmark mystery. I've reviewed almost 50 of these by this point, most of which I've watched this year, so they're kind of blurring together. But there's one, and I guess this is going to be a spoiler for this particular film, but there's one. Okay, I'll be as vague as I can to try and not spoil anything, but if you know what I'm talking about, please let me know. It involved the murder of somebody who ran an online, or did like an online craft thing, and that's not very helpful information, is it? But basically the person who did it had a specific motive, and it's very, very similar in this film. That doesn't make any sense if you don't know what I'm talking about, but the point there is the reason I thought it was that person, or 50% thought it was that person, is because there was a similar relationship between victim and culprit in another film. I think it was a Hallmark film. I could be wrong, but that's why I was suspicious about that person. If you know what I'm talking about, please let me know, because I cannot remember. That probably wasn't very helpful to anybody, but I just thought I'd explain that there was a reason why that I thought that it was that person, not because it was obvious or too obvious in the film, but because I've watched many of these by this point, there are going to be some similarities. But either way, I really enjoyed it. I thought Silent Witness was a good start, and I'm looking forward to the next one.